on this episode of The Clarity Code.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty obvious that the client is the subject matter expert, but
Right.
you're the expert in telling the story. So I think the mutual trust is really critical.
Together, we can go further than by ourselves. I think when a client comes in, viewing us more as just like a hire or just a photocopier or a printer, I feel like that only hurts the video because then there's no room for feedback and there's not a two-way street anymore. So the ideal partnership absolutely goes straight to the idea of it being a collaboration and really willing to come to the table and have a conversation as opposed to a dictation.
The Clarity Code, presented by Commotion Engine. Clear insights from marketing leaders.
This is a special episode of the Clarity Code, and we're calling it The Humans Behind the Video. Today's guest is Luke Doggett, the creative director at Commotion Engine, an industry-leading B2B animation company. As creative director, Luke leads the creative teams for each project, ensuring that the visuals and deliverables exceed the client expectations. We're going to talk about the creative process from creative brief to crafting the story that drives ROI for our clients. We'll also hear from two incredible voiceover artists who have played a major role in creating content for Commotion's clients. So Luke, welcome to the Clarity Code.
Thank you. It's really good to be here. I'm excited.
This is an important conversation that we're trying to have about how marketing leaders, we want them to understand how to get the deliverables that they're looking for. So many of our clients have come to us wanting to build trust with us after having had a difficult time at another agency. So let's talk about that. We've had every type of client, the ones who have 10-page creative briefs with all of their assets neatly organized in a Dropbox folder. And we've had clients that don't even really know what they want. So I think my first question for you is, how do we read minds?
Yeah, that's a good question because that's essentially what all the clients want. Like, can you just, take what's in here and put it out there and make it look
Yes.
cool? That's always what people want. Unfortunately, not a mind reader, but after many, many, many years of practice, I have found that questions, a lot of questions, but not only that, not just questions, but the right questions. And so we try to essentially get into the minds of our clients and kind of see what they're going for, and get it from their perspective, especially when they can't necessarily put it into words. We try to learn as much about them as we can so that way we can kind of see it from where they're coming from. And then that way we can kind of essentially read minds. That's how you do it. That's the trick of the trade.
Yeah, well, I always use the analogy of like going out to dinner because if you and I said, okay, let's go out to dinner, we both want food. And my idea might be, steak and like a Brazilian steakhouse, all you can eat meat. And then you
Mm.
might be like, well, I'm really in the mood for a salad. But either way, they have the same components. There's things that you eat, there's the utensils, there's the plates. It's all really a matter of what is it. And I like what you said about asking questions because that's really how we get to the bottom of it. Even the clients that we've had that seem to know the most of what they want, sometimes there's still some things that need clarity. And one example is writing scripts. Like a lot of times we'll write scripts for our clients, but some bring their own. And when you're crafting a story, have you ever offered adjustments to a client's vision or their script? And how did that work out for you?
Oh, yeah. No, all the time. I mean, I feel like that's kind of why I'm here is to be a sounding board and an objective perspective on whatever they're trying to do because it's difficult when they've got such a specific goal in mind and they've kind of essentially got blinders on for whatever they're working on. And so I bring an outside opinion to that, an outside kind of thought or view. So yeah, so if we get a script or even just a brief, I'll provide feedback on that, on something that I think like, hey, this is working in this direction. I think this little element could go a long way. And I will pitch that to them. And sometimes the clients go, we appreciate that, but we have a very specific idea in mind, and we can't do that because of this, this, and this. And that's totally fine. I understand that. But we do try to spice things up wherever we can because that's kind of that's the special sauce that we bring to the table, right? And so yeah, I give feedback all the time, and I would say probably it's a good 50-50. It's either received and taken and we do it, or the client feels strongly about a different direction, which is totally fine. Either direction, and either way, it works for us.
Well, how do you decide what belongs in the story and what needs to be cut?
Yeah. So research, research, research. We dive pretty deep into the brand themselves. We will read whatever they send us, the 10-page document or a creative brief or whatever, or even if it's just a website and past videos or whatnot. I try to go into the brand as much as I can and get a feel for where their design style is, what their tone is, who their audience is. I spend a lot of time just in the brand, and that purpose is so that way I can figure out what belongs and what doesn't, because they'll give me a lot of information, and most of the time that information doesn't really need to be in there. It's good information, but it's usually stuff that can be given to the audience or the potential customer later down the road. The initial explainer or, marketing piece or whatever we're working on, I mean, unless it is an educational piece, but for the most part, you're just trying to give them a taste to get them interested. And so it's kind of like, separating the wheat, right? Chaffing the wheat or whatever that's called. They'll throw the wheat up into the air and all the light, bad stuff will blow away, but the heavy, good stuff will fall back down. It's how you purify it. I think once we've spent enough time in the brand and we know what we're looking for, we could start messing with the message and the actual direction that the client gave us. And we can really start figuring out what belongs and what really doesn't need to be there. And then usually it comes down to just like there's like one core line or point or message, and that's what we're trying to get across. And we focus on that. And if stuff doesn't directly support that, or it's just extra and we don't need it, I try to get rid of it. So that's kind of how I start thinning down a lot of the stuff that we get and focus on, really what's important for the piece, for the video.
So then would you say that, in general, less is more?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how often we try to put too much in there, myself included. It's very easy to overcomplicate a message, and you can't do that. I mean, people need to be understand what you're doing within a few seconds, and they can't think twice about it. So if they have to think twice about what you just said, then it's already too complex. So yeah, less is more for sure.
Now, this is Jessica Lewis, who is a true artist from photography to voiceover work in her work in video and radio. You've probably heard her voice in hundreds of ads and explainers. How can we make something so creative and have all the messaging we need to it and simple enough to digest? And I think that that's where the challenge is in.
Yeah. And I think it's, all of this information, and we need to say all of these words and not realize you can say 3 words and it can give you as much emotion and connection as 500 words. So, what are those three
Absolutely.
words? What are you really trying to communicate?
So just like Jessica said, less really is more, and I feel like it's a big part of bringing clarity to a brand. I feel like it's not just with the words that we use, but also with visuals. What's your take, Luke, on that when it comes to the visual side? Do you typically start with like a clean palette and then, add to it, or how can you keep the visuals from being distracting with the whole idea of less is more?
Well, overall, our design style is pretty minimalistic. I think that's usually the place where you start and then you build onto that. So you start with something simple, just kind of the basic idea. You start with as easy of a visual that you can start with, and then if it needs more, you add to it. But essentially, you want to put your focus point up there first, and then kind of build around that. So for the visuals, it can kind of get off the rails really quickly as far as like how much the client wants to add or how much we want to put on there. So if we can scale that back to as bare minimum as possible, it's almost always better. It's almost always more helpful, and it keeps the piece nice and clean.
Yeah, for sure. And one of my favorite parts of, working with the clients that we have is that human to human interaction, even though most of the times it's remote or digital. From our clients to coordinating with you and the creative teams, I think that's one of the best part is that human connections. And what would you say makes a great partnership with a client? I know it goes two ways. Obviously, there's like the right fit a lot of times, but what has been in your experience the idea that makes a great partnership with the client?
I think just that understanding that it is a partnership, that there is things that they bring to the table as far as the project goes, and there's things that we bring to the table. I think if that understanding is there or that appreciation, you can go a long way. Because it's, together we can go further than by ourselves. I think when a client comes in viewing us more as just like a hire or just a photocopier or a printer, I feel like that only hurts the video because then there's no room for feedback and there's not a two-way street anymore. So the ideal partnership absolutely goes straight to the idea of it being a collaboration, something where we can have an interchange of ideas and tweaks and stuff like that because great ideas come from everywhere. They come from anywhere. They come from anyone. And so I think when you're not open to that, exchange, I feel like it does only damage. So the ideal, relationship is someone who's got an open mind and willing to see where someone else is coming from and other perspectives and really willing to come to the table and have a conversation as opposed to a dictation. And so I think that's kind of the those are like the main elements that create a great partnership when it comes to video production.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty obvious that the client is the subject matter expert, but
Right.
you're the expert in telling the story. So I think the mutual trust is really critical.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Mutual trust. That's fantastic. I like that.
Part of the collaborative effort is really building trust with the client. So, what are some ways that you've noticed are easy in as far as building trust with the client who might have their guard up?
Well, I think clients want to see what you can do. I think that goes a long way. I think getting, you know, the capabilities of like what we could create right at the front is important so that way they can kind of see what the end result could be. So that way, our credibility is higher. And then listening. Making sure we listen to the client is a pretty big one. So if the client is saying something like, "This has been frustrating," or "I didn't like this," or "This is what I really want to do," I think a lot of agencies go, "Yeah, yeah, 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 but that's wrong," and then they just kind of move on, or "That's not our style," or "We don't do that." I think that's a miss on the agency side. I feel like you need to listen, and I think you can build trust with anybody if you just listen to them. I mean, you got to build a relationship. We're all people, and so I feel like that's really important. So if the client doesn't feel heard, yeah, that trust is gone. So you got to make sure you take what they're saying. You got to really process it and then weave it into whatever we're doing. But it can't be ignored. And I feel like it's usually people tend to go one way or the other. That this is a good idea or it's a bad idea, and I don't feel like it's always that black and white. We need to listen to what they're trying to say and maybe suggest an alternative, right? So that way they feel heard, but it doesn't ruin what we're trying to do. So I feel like that those two things are kind of the big tickets to building trust with the client is making sure that they know we're capable, we can do what we're doing, so they've seen our work or whatever, and they feel heard. They feel heard, they feel like we're listening to them.
100%. And some of the things that I feel like help build trust as well is, offering revisions every step of the way. So we're not going to take a creative brief and a couple weeks later hand them a video, say, hope you like it. I think just that buy-in every step along the way is so important because there's been clients I've talked to that's how it was when they were at previous agencies. And well, hope you like it. And if you want to change it, it's going to cost you $10,000. But even beyond that is, getting on the same page creatively. So you've created mood boards for clients where they can see an idea of what you're thinking because creativity is so individual and yet it's hard to explain in words. So seeing the mood board, seeing the colors, seeing the brands come to life, I feel like has been a really big part of bringing that client's vision to life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because when we give a script, or anything, outline, brief, whatever is just text, they're not going to be able to visualize that, and most people can't. And so the mood boards being able to give detailed, actual designs and images showing like this is what we're thinking. Oh man, yeah, it's huge. It's massive. If they don't have anything to look at, they have no idea what to judge. Words are great, but the idea we have to create a video at the end of the day, so they have to be able to see the images. So yeah, that's a great point. Mood boards are super critical.
Yeah, and beyond that, I mean, you just mentioned like words. Most of an explainer video is words, and so beyond just reading lines, voiceover is the main character really of these videos. I mean, we have the
Mhm.
visuals, but what you're hearing is that brand voice. So why do you feel like voiceover matters so much to an explainer or a brand video?
Oh man, it matters a ton, because that is literally, like you said, it's the voice of the brand. So just like, um, music encourages an emotion in us, right? People's voices also do the same thing. They have a tone, they have a cadence, they have a feel. And so if that doesn't match the brand or the message, it's just completely off. It's just very awkward and weird. Uh, so the tone and the voice is so important. We spend a lot of time going through usually dozens or hundreds of voiceover auditions and artists for every project to make sure we get, the best possible match, for their brand, for their message, especially if it's end up going to be a campaign, then this person is going to be essentially your spokesperson in a lot of ways.
Yes,
And
for
so
sure.
that is, oh man, super critical. You got to get the right voice, the right feel, because if the audience is uncomfortable or like they're getting the wrong idea or the wrong feeling from just the voice and it doesn't match the product, like you wouldn't have Steve Urkel doing a VO for a perfume ad. Like that's just
Right.
not going to work. Unless you're going for a comedy angle, I guess, like, I don't know what perfume you'd be trying to sell, you know, funky fresh or something. But so you gotta make sure you match the right people with the right message. So important. So important.
Well, I think it's the brand voice that makes me think of like Flo from Progressive, Jake from State Farm. Obviously, these
Yeah.
are people on screen, but
Yes.
even when it's just audio, like this is who you're listening to. This is the person speaking on behalf of your brand.
Oh yeah.
But to take it one step further, there's also the idea of multimodal learning. I mean, with that, it's the scientific backed research that says when you hear something and see something, it reinforces that learning. So a lot of times our voiceovers are telling the meat of the information, and then there's some text or graphics on screen to reinforce that. And then we'll have captions, right? So all of these things together are reinforcing the learning and people can understand your brand message even better. So it's not just like, yes, you have to have the voice, but what does that voice sound like and how inviting is it to your brand needs? It makes a big difference.
Yeah, and not only that, but like the voiceover tells you what to feel and when to feel. Just like, musical climax in a movie or something like that. You know when it's a scary scene or if it's, a silly scene. Like the voice guides you. It is literally your
Yes.
guide through the video and the product. So yeah, absolutely. I agree with all that.
When you're creating a project and we're auditioning for voices with voiceover artists, what are you listening for when you're choosing the right voice for a video?
Well, again, it kind of goes back to the foundation of the research, make sure that I understand the brand. So at that point, we already kind of know what we're looking for and we can go pretty quickly. I think once you get down to the final 10 or so of like these all have the same feel, we're really looking for personality, something that's a little bit more dynamic and a voice that feels, that we can connect with. Oftentimes, the videos we make are trying to make that human connection, that emotional connection. And so that's what we're looking for in our voiceovers as well. So someone with a little bit, of range and feels like we're talking or they're talking. It's not strained or it's not monotone and robotic. That's so terrible. But it's so funny that once when you're talking to someone, they sound fine, but you put a mic in front of them and they have a really hard time, getting that right inflections and moving things around and stuff like that. And then yeah, I guess that goes along with the next point is that moldable, like a voice that's moldable. So that's always good if we need to direct or change things. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of like the main things I'm looking for when it comes to voiceover artists. So, personality, ability, connection, and, direct, directorable or moldable.
The thing about the explainer role, when you're talking about these things that are oftentimes from brands, and let's say it's a grocery store explainer about how the deli department works and how to run the slicer, there's an opportunity every now and then for humor in something. So if we're talking about running the slicer, sometimes I'll break the fourth wall a little bit and say like, yeah, you want to make sure your finger's not really that close to the blade, So the blade guard is important. And instead of just reading the text as you want to make sure your finger's not near the blade. So the blade guard's very important. Sometimes I will, put a little humor there and see if that goes, if that lands. And more times than not, that does.
That's awesome, Jason. I love that anecdote about the blade guard because that sounds really painful. I can feel it as you're talking. So How do you really adjust your delivery for different types of audiences? You said that a lot of times you might ask your client if they're not explicit. So what would you say would be the biggest difference for you when you're doing, let's say, a B2B explainer versus like a consumer brand, like you were mentioning, the burger joint? What would be like the way that you go about that differently?
You're talking the consumer versus B2B. The consumer is oftentimes coming off the street. B2B is inside. B2B, you've got them there. You're like in radio, we call it a P1, a P2, and a P3. It's a P1, that's your super engaged listener. Like they know everything about your brand. They will never change the station. The P2 is like, sometimes I listen to them, sometimes I listen to other people. And P3 is like, yeah, I might scan by them and I stop when I hear something I like, but they're not on my presets. So the B2B is a P1. That's a P1 audience that you're talking to. They're engaged. Um, and then you've also got the P2 in the B2B where maybe it's a brand that they're aware of and they need to try out that brand. And thinking about that B2B, how do I talk about, the solutions that I need to solve? I mean, sorry, the problems I need to solve, the solutions I need to bring, the pain points that need to be alleviated. Thinking about things like that versus a consumer where maybe the consumer is more like, it's a sale. You're going to save some money. It's that simple. Or we've got something new on the menu. You've got to try it. Or the pool is open for the whole summer. Bring your pool noodle and come on down. But I just like to try to be straightforward and let everyone know off the bat that, yes, I have more than one voice here. I have more than one way to deliver these lines. And I want you to hear it that way. And then I want you to hear it another way. And if I say, well, this first one's going to come through like I work at the company, and I'm going to sound like someone that's been turning wrenches on pipes all day long. And, that delivery is going to be more like, yeah, you got to turn it hard. You got to get the torque wrench out, and you got to make sure that you go to 33 PSI or else this is not going to seal. Versus you got to get the torque wrench out, and you've got to make sure it's that sounds like a professor explaining how to do geophysics or something like that. Versus
Right.
someone that, maybe works for this company where it's hands-on. So, yes, I would say that doing that for a voiceover artist when you're casting would mean like simple terms where you say, we'd like to hear it like this, or I'd like to hear it like this, but I'd also like to hear it like this as an option. And if you were to put that in the specs of the casting, I think that would give that success in hearing those different varieties of takes and delivery.
I think what Jason had to say was spot on. I think that's absolutely true. You can't just pick in a voice that matches the brand or goes with the brand. It's actually, in fact, I would even say maybe a little bit even more important that it's someone that will connect with the audience on the level that they need. Because if the audience isn't invested or ready to invest in whatever they're watching, they'll either turn it off or move on, swipe up or whatever, or they won't buy eventually. What you need is to build a connection with your audience. And so the voiceover artist and the way they say things is super critical to that. So yeah, Jason, right on, man. I totally agree.
100%. Now you are a creative director, so let's talk about creativity and authenticity. Luke, we have some clients who are super rigid with their requests, and we're basically just button pushers. But then we also have clients who are looking for a creative partner and want us to take the reins and present the ideas. So, curious on your perspective as the artist, like how do you leave room for surprise and spontaneity? How do you come up with creative solutions, especially with some of the clients who are looking for that creative partner and don't have much of a vision on their own?
Well, I think it's a lot of trial and error. And we don't always show that part of it to the client because, we can't bog them down with tedious approvals on everything, but we will go through a bunch of different versions. We'll try different things. We'll see if this works. We'll see if that works. If when the client is really rigid, we understand that, and that's it's like we work with that. And at the end of the day, the client is the boss, and we get that. And the final decision maker is the client, and that is fine. We understand that, and that's the only way something like that moves forward smoothly. But you do have to leave room for things to change. And the being keeping an open mind on how the creative, process could flow is really really important. And that's when you start getting those gems, because the I've had great ideas for videos that I think really made the difference at the last minute. I mean, ideas have their own agenda. They don't follow any sort of schedule. They come when they come, and and there's nothing we can really do about that. We wrangle it the best we can, but the idea about creativity is that it's not a rigid form. The creative process is not rigid. It never can work that way. So there always has to be that room for something new, something different, something spontaneous. Something personally that I do on my work is that I will work on something and figure out all the groundwork on what we're trying to do, and then I'll leave it. I'll come back after a little bit. So I'll walk away. I'll work on something else. I'll go for a walk or come back the next day, and I'll read it again with as best as I can, fresh eyes, open to something changing. Do I feel like there's something better that could go here? And so that process of kind of like working on it, molding it, walking away, coming back, working on it, molding it, walking away, coming back again, that is where you start to get really good stuff. And I think that process is what allows for the unknown, or room for growth, right? Another way to say it, because that spontaneous, or that giving that room for that spontaneity, that's that's where you get magic, and that is good stuff. So clients who understand that and are willing to do that, their pieces almost always come out better. Other people, they need a cookie cutter video done, pronto, and that's another need. But I think those two things they're just wildly different scenarios, so you treat them differently.
Yeah, how do you stay fresh? I mean, you've done all these projects for clients for over a decade. How do you stay fresh with ideas that keep the model going? Because one thing that our clients have mentioned is that even our repeat clients, they love that each new product that we make with them is something new and unique. So, what inspires you? Where do you draw inspiration from to keep things with the same quality level, but just changing in its creativeness?
I think one of the easiest ways to stay fresh is just make sure that you're really aware of what's out there. And that's kind of what I do, is that I feel like it's part of my job to watch a lot, to consume a lot of media and marketing material, so that way I know what's, trending, what's doing well. And that naturally can guide a lot of new ideas going, "Oh, I like that," or "That's an interesting way. Let's combine what I know already and let's see if we can make something a little fresh." And then that kind of goes into the next point of just combining things. There's an infinite possibility of, combining things using different styles or different methods, and just seeing what else you come up with. And I love doing that. And, experimentation is massive in what I do. I have to experiment. There has to be a lot of research and development. There's just no way around that, because every project does benefit from being a little fresh, or being new, or being different. I mean, unless it's a steady campaign, and certain things have to line up and be the same. That's different. But most part, people want something new, and coming up with something new every time is daunting. And so I think one of the ways you can do that is just give yourself a huge library of content to draw from. And that's what I do. I try to stay very current, not only in media, but also like visual media, but also books and reading and stuff like that. I feel like you can get a lot from there. But probably one of the biggest things that is helpful in staying fresh as a creative is taking breaks. That's massive. And have experiencing life, going out
Mm.
and doing things, being with people, spending time with friends and family, stuff like that. That probably helps me the most, because one, it renews the mind, helps me to think more sharply and clearly when I come back. But life experience is what we draw from. Life experience is what we build upon. So if I don't have any life experience, I'm not going to be able to create much. And so that part is huge, huge. So staying up to date on trends and current media, consuming a lot, seeing what other professionals are doing, making sure that we're staying up to date with that, but also just learning new techniques, learning new fundamentals, and then also stepping away from the creative completely and just having life experiences, going on road trips and adventures and spending time with the people we love. I feel like those two things are the main elements. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of tricks and stuff that you can do to stay fresh, but those are the main elements that I use to stay fresh creatively.
You've got to touch grass sometimes, honestly. So that makes that makes a lot of sense. So this is something I'm curious about. I mean, we've worked together on dozens of projects, and I usually the client will see one or two versions of your work. I will see, three to four. How, like, let's say you're illustrating storyboards. How many different versions do you go through in your own workflow before you're like, hey, this is the one or two that we want to present?
Oh, wow, man, this question's personal. Like, how many times do I mess up before I
Yeah, exactly.
how many mistakes do I make on a daily basis? Oh,
On an
many.
average, how many
Yeah,
mistakes are there, and how could you be
yeah,
more efficient?
exactly. This is draft 400. I hope you like it. No, honestly, maybe earlier in my career I would do dozens. Now that I've been a little bit more seasoned, I actually don't go through as many drafts, physical drafts, as I used to. Now in my head, I'll create all sorts of stuff visually and I'll go through 20 different things in my mind
Right.
while listening to music or figuring out the right voiceover, and those things feed into each other and the visuals all the time. So I'll go through a lot of drafts in my head, a lot of ideas. But actual physical drafts that I create and then go, nah, I don't like that and throw out, I'm actually not too bad about that. We try to be very efficient because time is everything and we don't want to waste any time. And so usually about one or two drafts, maybe three, and then I'll bring something forward to you or the other design team or whatever, and then we'll talk and kind of figure things out, and then we'll present that to the client. So yeah, usually maybe two or three on my own. And even then, well, I guess maybe more like 4 or 5 if you count, like, tweaking one draft a little
Sure.
or changing that little thing or changing that. So it depends on what counts as a draft, I guess, but for the most part at this point, we try not to waste too much time spinning our wheels on things. There is a point of diminishing returns when it comes to the creative, which is where we kinda specialize, is that we push it all the way up to where we really maximize our effort without sitting there spending a ton of time because, you can spend years, you know, pulling apart an idea and figuring out if this is better, or if that's better, if we need to do this, and it never stops. It never stops. Eventually, you just gotta stop and figure out what works best for the time and the budget we're working with. So, yeah, anyway, hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Yes, now I know what you do.
Yep. Yeah, I just watch TV and watch movies.
Let's watch movies all day, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I get my ideas.
We both went to film school, and I remember, talking to my wife when we were in college. She's a science major, and she's doing real homework, and, we're probably sitting there watching movies and writing reports about it and making movies, so it's the creative side of a brain is very different.
Very different. It looks very different. It
Yeah,
functions very different. Yep.
that's exactly right. Well, let's talk about the future, Luke. How do you see the role of human creatives evolving with the AI tools that are emerging?
Oh, well, AI. Well, I think we all know that AI is gonna take over and kill us all, so if we could just
Yes.
accept that, I think we'd be fine.
Just be ready for it.
Yeah. Oh, it's gonna happen, so that's right. Yeah, no, that's a great question. AI is really in the conversation a lot these days. It's everywhere. People are worried about it, excited about it, and I feel like the emotions just run the gamut when it comes to AI. And so I have tried to keep my pulse on it as best I can without being wrapped up in the hype of AI. Either direction, either it's the worst and we can't do anything with it, or it's our savior and it's going to solve all our problems. I don't feel like either is true. I feel like AI is a very interesting development as far as when it comes to purely the creative side. AI obviously has permeated many industries, many markets. The only thing I can really speak to is the creative side. And so I think that I think the two dangerous views on AI is it can do everything and it's going to replace all humans, even quickly. I feel like that's too dangerous just because AI is still missing a pretty key human element when it comes to whatever it's creating. It just doesn't quite understand what it means to be human. It may get better. We may see that change a little bit. But I think even if AI starts nailing what it means to be human and they start nailing that stuff, I feel like eventually it's going to hit a wall of not being able to really create anymore because, again, like I talked about earlier, the human experience brings so much. And so I feel like AI needs to be paired with human intelligence. I feel like that's the way forward. And, the other dangerous idea when it comes to AI is ignore it completely, put your head in the ground. It's just terrible, it's bad. I create the way I want to, and that's it. And that's not going to be helpful either because things are moving forward. We can't ignore that. There are things that AI can do and tasks wise that speeds up our workflow, I'm not even joking, 10,000%. I mean, it's massive, massive differences. And so if we sit here and say we can't use AI for the creative at all, I feel like we're missing a really important and key opportunity to build upon it. Because when I can spend less time doing the groundwork for a project, if AI can get me 70% of the way there, most of the time in our projects, it's that last 10, 20%. That's where the amazing magic gold, whatever, that's when that happens. And so if an AI can get me there faster, then I can start really playing around with some fun stuff and start developing and really take that and build upon it. So I think, I heard it described one time that humans moving forward without AI is just slow and painful. AI moving
Yes.
forward without humans at all is scary, dangerous, and boring.
Oh, that's good.
But humans and AI together, though, that I feel like that would create greatness. I feel like then we could really
Yeah.
move up, the notch into the next level. So I think human intelligence, human creativity, human ingenuity on top of the AI tool, that is a ladder and a foundation for success. I see that 100%. Um, Now, AI tools are shifting so fast and so quickly. At Commotion and me personally, we always are very leery to try any new tool that says it can replace human creativity. We do a lot of research and development. We stay on the bleeding edge. We always try new things. We try this, we do that. We invest our own money and time to troubleshoot stuff to see if it works or if it doesn't work. But it has to really prove itself. We don't just throw an AI tool at the process just because it's fun and trendy and new or easier. It has to really promote what we're doing, and it has to really make what we're doing better. So any AI tool, which we use many, only makes it into our workflow if it proves itself that it can do it. And I feel like that, balance of the human AI moving forward is really the best way to do it. You can't ignore it, but I feel like a adaptation just shrinks our brain and makes
Yes.
us lazy Neanderthals. We can't do either, we can't do either, because I can usually tell when something's AI written or visual or created. It still stands out to me when there's no human element to it at all. I can pick that out pretty easily. And I think most people can. They
For
may not
sure.
be able to put their finger on it, but they go, "This feels off." And I feel like that's the danger.
Something doesn't smell right here.
Exactly. Yeah, I heard one person describe it as, I don't know what's wrong, but it's like uncanny valley. It's like, yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's true, and I think using AI to be more efficient is one thing, but using it to be creative for you, that's where I
Right.
think we go wrong.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think AI maybe as a sounding board or a brainstorming tool or stuff like that.
Yes.
Fantastic. Oh, fantastic. It can help solve the dreaded problem of the blank page a lot faster. It can
Yes.
just get things out there, because most of the time when we're creating, the first few ideas are bad. I mean, they're just bad. I mean, that's the only way you can get it. I mean, almost everything we put out there first, the first drafts, the first whatever, are bad. I mean, it's the only way you can create. And so AI, I think helps shorten that process quite a bit. So yeah, absolutely.
Love that. And one thing that for sure has not become commonplace to be fully human is AI voiceover work. Commotion, for any of our major product packages, we will use a human voiceover artist because nothing else can really empathize the way that a voiceover artist who's a real person can create a voice.
Relying on AI for too much that's the problem right there. That's when you start getting that really weird, funky stuff, and it just doesn't bring the right emotion to the piece. Um, and so far, AI voiceovers has just not been to the same level as a real person, and so we still feel like it is hypercritical to use a real voice, a real human voice, to make that connection versus a machine. The machine just can't quite do that. They can't connect with the audience.
All right, so Luke, talk to the CMOs and the marketing directors. If you could say anything to, the typical client or who would be the client about working with a video team or an agency like ours, what would you say to them?
I would say that this partnership is not just something that is going to help you, but it's critical for what you're doing. You really do need a video agency to be on board with you and what you're trying to create. Uh, and I would view, a video agency more as an extension of your team, which is what we operate as. And that we can bring stuff to the table that maybe you hadn't quite thought of. And I feel like if you come to working with a video agency with that kind of open-mindedness and willing to collaborate a little bit, then you will get a lot better results than what you were, hoping for or expecting, right? So I feel like when looking to hire a video production agency, you're looking for a partner. You're looking for someone to collaborate with you and come along the journey with you and building your brand and building what you want to do, because that is the goal, right? Many hands make light work, and that's what we're here to do for video agency as a video agency, because we are as invested in making your video amazing and profitable and effective as you are. And so the last thing we want to do is create friction. But the first thing we want to do is create something that's amazing and beautiful and that works for what you're doing.
And that's what we like to do, is we like to partner with our clients and to provide like the strategy. Like we said earlier, they are the subject matter experts, but we are the storytelling experts, and we've done it for, dozens of brands to help make something that's, full of chaos and very difficult to explain really clear. So really it's people, process, and partnership, not just assets that we're working with. Like, we're creating something with you as a partnership.
Right. Yep. 100%.
And now, the clarity check.
All right, so our first clarity check question is, what to you is the most underrated part of the video making process?
Oh, research. 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Research. Figuring out, the brand and who the client is and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of people skip that too quickly. You have to immerse yourself in the messaging and what you're trying to do first. I feel like that is very critical and overlooked often. Probably second to that, though, is sound design. It's funny how often clients don't even think about sound effects or the music or stuff like that, and how that's an afterthought. I feel like that's a huge miss. I usually pick music, or at least what I want to do, before I even draft the boards. Music is huge, and sound design is huge. Sound effects, I can't tell you how many times I've done sound effects on a video and sent it to a client, and they come back and just huge eyes going, wow, that sounds awesome. It's massive difference. And I'm like, yeah, sound effects is a big deal. So sound design, I feel like sound design is another big one.
I would say that, we have the voiceover as a character. You have the characters on screen. That's your second character. But sound design is like one of the biggest players, especially in an animated piece where that's all it is graphics moving around on a screen, but with that sound design. And if you ever watched a movie without the sound design, you wouldn't be as immersed. It's totally different. What's the strangest request you've ever seen in a creative brief?
We did get one client one time who wanted to do like a full-on Star Trek theme. And they had a very interesting idea to go like way out in space, and they even wanted to full-on rip off the tagline, "Where no one has gone before," or something like that. And so I remember reading that going, oh, okay. We try not to belligerently copy other material. And so we tried to steer them a little bit of a different direction. But yeah, that was probably the most interesting one that I've gotten so far, is that we would like to go full starch.
Yeah. Oh, and they wanted the deliverable in 8K, right?
That was the same client. They came back and said, hey, we would love to do this in 8K. And this was 5-6 years ago. So 4K hadn't even really landed yet. I mean, 4K
That's
is
hilarious.
Still not necessarily around everywhere. So yeah, they asked
Go
if
big
we
or
could
go
do
home.
this animated Star Trek video in 8K. That was probably the most interesting one that I've ever had to quote and figure
That's
out.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Copyright infringement and 8K, that brings the budget up a little bit.
Exactly.
That's
And I was
hilarious.
like, I talked to them, like, do you need 8K? And they really felt like they did. And I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, they don't even put 8K in the movie theaters, but all right.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
What's your go-to source of creative inspiration in or outside of work?
In that I find a lot of inspiration from being outside, being with people, experiencing life. Nature is a big one for me. Maybe also music. I find a lot in music. I'll listen to different artists and different genres from the huge spectrum, massive. I love putting Spotify in shuffle and just throwing out like, what's new, what are people doing. That'll oftentimes just trigger things in my mind of different ways, different techniques, different visuals. So that's a big one for me for sure. Music.
What's one creative hill that you'll die on no matter what?
That's a good question. Hill to die on. I would say simplicity, keeping things really clear. So again, clarity. I feel like those two things always make the biggest difference, and so I usually push that the hardest. We always try to funnel it down to its simplest form. So I feel like that makes the biggest difference, and I usually am pushing that tune. Again, client is in charge, especially when it comes to the project, and so they make the final call. So if they want to go a different direction, we do flex with them, but I will try to still push them towards that direction in a, as easy and a loving and professional manner, always, to just try and make it more simple and more clear.
Yep.
You need to be simple and clear. I feel like those are the big ones for me.
That's right. What brand outside of your clients or work that you've done do you think absolutely nails it with video content?
I think the one that sticks out to me often is Airbnb. I feel like their stuff is just so good. It's not only that the quality is so high, but they know who they're talking to. Their messages are so perfect for whoever they're trying to get to go somewhere, and they are shifting with the market so seamlessly and so smoothly. I feel like Airbnb's content is really, really powerful right now because it shows people on vacation and, this is what it looks like to be here, but in a very fun, engaging way. So I really like what Airbnb is doing.
All right, so Luke, last clarity code question. How would you define clarity?
Clarity. I would say clarity really comes down to vision. Being able to see where you need to go and how to get there, but not only vision, but understanding of why you want to get there, and whatever you're looking at or your challenges in front of you, you can understand what they are and how to overcome them. And then whatever you're seeing or viewing, you understand exactly what's happening. You comprehend everything. So comprehension, understanding, and vision. I feel like those are kind of like the big words for me when it comes to clarity.
Amazing. Luke, thanks for your time, and thanks for joining us on the Clarity Code.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
So there you have it. That's the humans behind the video. The purpose of this episode, like I said, was to make sure that you, as the marketing leader, get exactly what you want when you're working with your video production company or animation agency. It's truly a partnership. So when you're working with agencies, keep these things in mind, and you'll have great success getting the deliverables that you're looking for. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Clarity Code. I'll see you next time.
Catch the Clarity Code on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.